Thanks, Rob. First of all, I want to thank everybody. Pretty good turnout here, so I really appreciate everybody's time. And I do see some familiar names on the little list there, so it's good to see people pop in and listen in. I'm Bill Tennant. I'm the CEO of Sniffer Robotics. My background, I was an Army officer for 20 years, retired from the Army, and I've been doing landfill gas ever since. I worked for about 5 years with waste management, about 5 years for advanced disposal, did 5 or 6 years of consulting work, and I've been with Sniffer now for about 2 years. So that's kind of my background. All I do is landfill gas. That's all I've done my whole life. So, well, post-Army life anyway. So that's just a little bit of background on me. So let's get started here. If I can get the slides to advance, hold on. Oh, whoa, that was weird. Whatever happened there? All right, it's a quick agenda. Going to just give an introduction to the company. It's a technology update. We'll talk about emissions and odor studies, renewable energy, compliance, and then we'll have time for questions. Okay, so a little bit about us. We are the most technically advanced and also reliable solutions for doing emissions monitoring. I say that because we have EPA approval. The reason we have EPA approval is because we've demonstrated to them through submittal of data that we have very few false positives, very few false negatives. When you're doing compliance, that's very important. We're headquartered. We were founded in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I put the star in Cumming, Georgia, because that's where I live right now, but we still are officially headquartered out of Michigan. And then you can see the locations where we are. And we have partners as well that we work with for the West Coast, for Canada, and we also are starting work in South America. An exciting note is I literally got back from France last night, and we flew 5 sites in Europe, Portugal, and in Canada. I'm sorry, Portugal and France, and we're currently flying in Poland, so hopefully we'll have European partners coming up shortly. Another thing of note on here, Project Canary. We have partnered with Project Canary to provide emissions rate quantification. We send them our data along with our wind correlation from our drone, and they have advanced air modeling, and they provide us with emissions rate quantifications with air and everything else, which allows our clients to help determine what they're actually emitting from the landfill or their project so that they can make corrective actions. And on the bottom there, you can just see a partial list of all the different companies we work for. Basically, we work for all the large waste companies, most of the renewable energy companies, and various consultants and municipalities. So we have a pretty good client list there. So, state of the world right now. We have all these satellites that are getting a lot of attention in news. They fly over. You get what I call the big blue blob if you look to the left. And some of them have red and yellow mixed in, but you get a big blob. And you get that gives visibility to regulators. It gives visibility to communities, environmental activist groups, and gets a lot of attention on sites that get identified by satellites. Satellites right now typically have a pixel of either 30 meters or 50 meters, and that gives them a resolution down to about 70 to 100 cubic feet per minute. So if you're getting identified by a satellite, that's some pretty good emissions there. But it doesn't localize it very well. It doesn't give you exact locations on the ground. So I like this series of 3 slides because it shows you there was the satellite imagery on the left that was identifying the site as an emitter. We happened to fly that site the same week. And you can see the second one is an interpolated map that we produced from our flights showing from 1 part per million up where the emissions locations were. And then this site asked us to manually verify. So we went out in the field with a technician, manually verified. And those red dots on the right are exact locations on the ground with grid coordinates, pictures, and all that in our app for them to go out and remediate. So it just shows you the cascade of technologies. Satellites will give you an alert. Then you need to use some other technology to pinpoint exactly where your emissions are so you can fix them. Right now, for compliance on landfills, regulatory compliance, there's 2 methods. There's method 21, which is a guy walking, and there's OTM 51, which is using the sniffer drone to do compliance monitoring. There's a lot of other technologies out there. You have the TDLAS, which is the tunable diode laser that shoots a plume through the, shoots a laser through the plume and will give you a measurement of parts per million meter. It's not the same as parts per million. It's giving you the amount of methane and a 1 meter column of gas. And then you have to have some information on wind and some other algorithms in order to determine the exact location of the emission. You also have, as I mentioned, aerial platforms and satellite platforms, which are more giving you that there's an issue at a site. And there's also in-plume monitoring on the right-hand side there, where they will fly upwind and downwind on a vertical flux plane, and they'll be able to use that data to do a mass balance and calculate emissions rates as well. And there's also fixed sensors that can be deployed on a site and some other technologies, but this is mostly the aerial technologies that we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about what PPM means. Part of the reason that lasers haven't been approved for compliance is, first, all the regulations are written to identify on-the-ground parts per million, and not parts per million meter. And parts per million meter can mean a lot of different things, as you can see on here. If you have 5 parts per million across a 20-meter path, you're going to get 100 parts per million. If you have 20 parts per million in a 5-meter path, you're going to get 100 parts per million. If you have 50 parts per million in a 2-meter path, you're going to get 100 parts per million, but they're very different emissions rates and emissions locations. So that's part of the issue with lasers. It's not the only thing, but that's one of the things you have to keep in mind when you look at the different technologies. They all have some applications. They all have their strengths and weaknesses, and you have to decide up for you which is the best one to use. And sometimes the answer is a combination of different technologies. So obviously we're Sniffer Robotics, so we want to talk about our technology. This is the Sniffer Robotics Sniffer Drone Generation 2. I used to have a slide here that had Generation 1 and Generation 2 side by side to compare them, but I took that off because we don't fly Gen 1 anymore. We haven't used it at one site right now, mostly because Generation 2 is leaps ahead of where Generation 1 was. Generation 1 was a proof of concept, and we used it to get EPA approval, but this is a much better solution that allows us to do a lot of unique things. We shrunk the payload from 8 pounds down to about 2 pounds, a little over 2 pounds. The drone itself, because of the decreased rate in a smaller drone, doubles our battery life, so we can fly 30 to 40 minutes at a time. We can fly at 15 meters. We can fly about 250 acres a day. So it gives us quite a bit of performance as well. It's not uncommon for our pilots in a full day's work to fly 20 to 25 flights, which is pretty impressive. And I think that's good. So, and the other thing to notice down here, oops, go back. Sorry about that. I just hit the wrong button there. Yeah, is down here, maximum wind. It says here 12 miles an hour. Typically 12 to 15 miles an hour is about where we will cease operations. And it's not necessarily the drone capability, but we start to get a lot of wind buffeting at that point. And then our nozzle is going to lift off the ground, and also the methane is being dispersed. So it's just not as effective. All right, so this is Sniffer Drone 2 in action. You can see the drone's flying along there. On the hardware payload, there is a laser. The laser is not used for methane detection. It's used for active terrain following. So we're shooting a laser down to the ground. I think it's like 50,000 times a second or 5,000 times a second. It's giving distance data to the drone and constantly updating the height to keep the drone exactly 6 meters off the ground. It's dragging the hosel system, which is a weighted nozzle. And you can see if you watch it, it stays on the ground pretty good. The whole point of this system was to mimic a guy walking, and according to the Method 21 regulation, you're supposed to keep the hose or the inlet of your detector 2 to 4 inches off the ground, and that's what this is designed to do. It's got a slight bend in it, and it keeps the nozzle on the ground 2 to 4 inches at all times. Now, there are some times when you're going over hard terrain or longer vegetation that it'll bounce a little bit, but if you've ever seen a person walking doing some, they're going to be a lot less accurate on that as well. So that's a quick overview of what it looks like. All right, so mission studies. We're going to talk about mission studies. We're going to talk about compliance. We're going to talk about odor studies. Mission studies is pretty much non-compliance work. We can fly the sniffer drone for compliance, but a lot of our work is non-compliance for sites to improve their emissions or for renewable energy companies. As we collect data, there's a process. The first thing is we're going to do flight plans, which you see on the left. We typically design the flight plans based off battery life. So they're going to be 30 to 40-minute flight plans. They're also going to be based off a line of sight because we have to keep the drone in sight at all times. Once we fly the flight plans on the right, you can see, lo and behold, it looks almost exactly like the flight plans. There's some slight deviations where you have to go around obstacles or whatnot, but it's pretty accurate. And if you look, you can see that the paths are very straight, and the path, the distance between points is also pretty consistent. That's important because that consistency of data allows us to do really good modeling, which is what's important to identify emissions rates and other things. So our core technology is data collection. Sniffer drone is cool, drones are cool, but it's really just a really efficient, really good data collection tool. The panes on here kind of show the process. We fly along, we're collecting the data. And when the drone is coming back to change batteries, there's a little button on the handheld. You hit send, automatically shoots the data up to AWS to ArcGIS. As soon as that data hits the system, it populates these circles. Yellow circle is 200 parts per million, red circle is 500 parts per million. And then if we have a field technician there to manually verify, he's going to use his phone to navigate directly to the center of that circle. He's going to do a spiral pattern inside that circle, identify the exact location. Gosh darn it. Sorry about that. My mouse is a little touchy today. The exact location of the emission right there. When he gets to that location, he's just like you would with normal surface monitoring. He's going to put a flag on the ground. He's going to take a picture, upload that information into our system, and it populates instantly. So the site can begin remediation right away. The second key part of what we do is data transformation. It's great to collect a lot of data, and it's great to look and make pretty maps, but the pretty maps have to tell you something, and they have to enable you to act to correct whatever issues you've got. So once we bring the data into ArcGIS, we're able to transform it into all sorts of products that allow you to identify your leaks and to remediate them. And as I said, we do it for studies, odor, energy, renewable energy, and compliance. This is a few of the product. I say a few because the limit to the type of data products we can make is pretty much restricted to imagination. These are some of the standard data products, but we have a whole bunch of other things that we can do. On the left, the far left, do you see that's an initial peak map? When the data is shot to ArcGIS, it automatically generates this type of a map, and you'll have that in your hands within 24 hours in PDF via email, but you can also access it near instantaneously on the website. We do interpolated maps, which give you your methane from 1% up. I say up because originally our Gen 1 went to 100%. Our Gen 2 only goes up to 40,000 parts per million. But above that, it really doesn't matter. And also the reason it only goes that high is because it goes down to 200 parts per billion on the low side. So it's a much more sensitive detector. As we fly a site multiple times, we can start doing change detection maps, which is kind of one of the products in the middle. And then through Project Canary, we can do emissions rate quantifications, and that's kind of the example of a map there. The dots on that map are showing modeled emissions locations with the amounts, and then they have an algorithm that runs this model like 1,000 times, adjusting locations and rates to determine what the emissions are across the landfill. We also can import well field monitoring data from landfills into the system with the ArcGIS, and that allows us to correlate emissions locations to well field performance. So if you have something going on in your well field that's causing emissions, we bring the data and we can look at all the different well field parameters, identify those things, and provide you with an action plan to fix. In this particular instance, there was the emission location there. And when you look at the well field data, you can see that The normal vacuum on that location was 25 inches. It only had 6 available. Pretty clear that there's a problem there. And then we would identify that as a bad header line, and then you fix the header, you collect the gas, and then we go on from there. As we do multiple, a lot of sites have us on a program. We fly some sites monthly, we fly some sites quarterly. It's just whatever the site or the people want, whatever their goal is. We can start to do a lot of different types of correlation maps. The one on the left shows you increases and decreases in methane. So the red shows that in that location, methane's increased. Blue shows decrease. A lot of the states now require 50,000 meter grids, but we can also use that grid methodology to show the same thing. We can show where things are going up, where things are going down. We also have the ability to show over multiple flights areas where it's increasing, and then we can also show areas where the methane is high, but it's getting worse, which I think is the most critical thing. So there's just a million different ways you can slice and dice the data to get an information to you to correct your emissions. We also are deep into the data. We start to trend lots of different parameters. This shows just, we have done this site, and I'll have an example of this as a case study here in a minute. But this shows the site that we flew 4 times, and you can see the top purple graph is showing emissions rates with the error bars. And you can see over time, the emissions rates from the landfill are going down from about 300 down to about 130 SCFM. At the bottom, you're trending raw data. The mean ppm, the median ppm, and the standard deviation, all trending down. And then on the right, literal leak counts. When we first went out there, we found 19 leaks over 500 parts per million. And as we went through the progress, we got all the way down into June where we literally found nothing. There were no emissions rates at all. So we can trend that data across. We have some clients that we've been doing it for like a 2-year data trend, which, oh, here it is right here. Here's a site that we've been doing for many years, and this is a site that was having a lot of regulatory interest, shall we say. And we were able to data trend over a long period of time to show the regulators that the work they're doing is continually decreasing their emissions, which is what the regulators wanted to see. And something new, which is really cool, is even if we only fly the site once, we have been flying now for 7 years commercially. We have a database of over 200 landfills that we've flown and thousands of flights. So we are able to give you an estimate of where you fall amongst all the landfills flown in the industry. So what we do is we take those 200 landfills, which is thousands of sites, we randomly select 150, and then we will compare your emissions rates to that 150 to tell you where you fall in a percentile and also provide you with what some of the numbers mean in this chart here. So it's a pretty useful tool. I'm going to ask you quickly to look. You can see flight A, flight B, flight C, flight D. I'll show you this in our case study in a minute, but you can see that it is handy. And then later on, you see there's 2 more that went up. Well, that was a little while longer, and they started having some backsliding, and that kind of shows in this as well. So it's a really useful tool. It's also good to just show, hey, where am I against my peers? And sometimes that's a good thing to know. All right, so we've talked about emission studies. That's non-compliance work. If we don't, if we don't follow all the requirements in OTM 51, which is the compliance study, we can do non-compliance work without fear of it being for regulatory. But let's talk about odor hunting. Obviously, odor issues and consent orders based off odor issues are a large problem for the landfills. You'll have neighbors in an uproar. You'll have Facebook pages against your website trying to slow down any expansions. You've got the EPA or the state regulators, neighbors, communities, and you get lit up by satellites. All these things are very negative for a site and cause a lot of heartaches. If you've ever had a landfill with odors and you've been through the ringer, it's not pretty. And there's a cost to that. This just talks about fines and other things, but the other cost of that is if you're having to make repairs to your gas system under the threat of legal action or regulatory stuff, you have to do things faster. You have to compress timelines. You have to pay overtime for workers, and that construction can double in cost just because of the environment that you're in and the working weekends, working long hours, and all that to get it done. So there's some significant cost to odors. So how do we address odors? Right now, we don't have a sensor yet that directly measures the methane, H2S or odor issues like methane. We're very close. I would imagine probably by Q1 of next year, we will have that capability. But right now, what we do is we fly at tight spacing, 15 or 7.5 meters on the landfill. We identify every leak location that's 50 parts per million. Then we will go to all of those locations with a handheld H2S detector and identify areas that have H2S and methane coming out at the same time. There's a pretty strong 70 or so percent correlation between, actually it says 72%, 70% or so correlation between methane locations and hydrogen sulfide locations. So we've been very successful in helping to identify odor issues through this method. Like I said, in the near future, we'll be able to fly the sniffer drone and provide heat maps and everything that we do for H2S, just like we do for methane. It's probably about 6 months out. All right, now we'll talk about renewable energy. We were founded for compliance. We quickly learned, though, that our technology really is applicable for renewable energy, both on the digester side and the landfill side. So we've actually, at this point, about 70% of our business doesn't come from compliance. It comes from other things such as the non-compliance emission studies. So here's the different applications that we work in. Landfills, we already know we work in landfills. We were born in landfills. We were designed for landfills. But we also do a lot of work on the dairy side with covered lagoons, all the different types of digesters that you got a DVO. Oops, gosh darn it. DVO digester here. You've got a wastewater treatment plant here and a CSTR, which is a constant stir tank method right here. All these different applications are we've done work on successfully. So when we do lagoons and when we do the landfills, obviously they're pretty straightforward. The sniffer drone is designed for that work. When we start doing some of these other technologies, we use a combination of methods because every one of them is different, and we use it with different tools. So we'll use thermal, we'll use a person with a handheld meter, we'll use a laser. Yes, it's PPM, but we use it for certain things. We'll use our sniffer drone. So a combination of technologies in order to identify the emissions and provide our clients with the information that they need. And so for the process, it's kind of a repetitive process. It's like a circle. The first thing we'll do is data collection. Sniffer drone goes out, flies, identifies the issues. We get it into ArcGIS and we do analytics and transform that data into information. We use that information to develop an action plan in order to address those issues. Hopefully that action plan really results in collecting more gas, which leads to more money, but you're not done yet. As I'll show you in a minute, you repeat the plan, you repeat that process, you fly it again, and then you identify more stuff and you keep knocking down the emissions over time until you've almost eliminated them or at least got them to as low as you're going to be able to get with the system that you have. So that's the process. We also provide, so we do work on the landfills or on the digesters very successfully, but we also can provide information on the upgrade plants as well. This is done manually for the most part. I'm not going to fly a drone inside a plant, but it also provides very good information. So the way we'll do that is we'll go out to the site, we'll meet with the plant manager, walk through the plant, identify all the components they want monitored. Then our technician will use a couple of different technologies to check every valve, every flange, every sample port, every compressor seal, everything throughout the plant. Then you can see here, that's this. Then if you go and click on one of those, you're going to get this pop-up that shows you how many parts per million, what the area location where the leak was, and an arrow saying it's right here. And if you can't go and fix that at this point, then I really don't know what I can do for you. That's all about actionable information, and you can action an arrow saying fix here. Here's a quote from one of our our clients. Peter Smith, he's the vice president of operations at Moral Energy, and he's specifically talking about the plant surveys that we do. We did it at 2 of their sites initially, and after seeing the amount of leaks we found, and they have their guys out there checking, but we're very thorough, and we provide the visualization, and so they're having us come out. We go out to all their sites now, usually quarterly, identify all the leaks, and that they're literally going right behind us as we identify and fixing stuff, so that they're keeping the gas that they're processing in the system and not emitting out into the world. All right, so this is the case study from Peter at one of his sites in Texas, and I like this slide because it pretty much shows you a lot of different things. Okay, it shows you a case study, and if you look here in January, this was 2024, so this was from last year. This was our initial flight. We lit the site up pretty well, but you can see there's a lot of stuff along the side slope. That's probably erosion, and then you had a whole lot of stuff in the middle here. That's gas system, right? So we flew it in January. That was the baseline. And at that time, they were emitting about 283 SCFM of methane. Understand that's not landfill gas, that's methane. All right, so at 100%. So what they did was, this was right before they started construction. They used that information that we provided them to adjust well locations, to identify areas they needed to work on cover and all these other things. And you can see in February, they were about halfway through their construction, but they'd done a lot of work on the side slopes and cleaned that up a bit. And then working on, and then in March, they were done with construction. And you can see pretty much everything except for this one little area had been cleaned up. Well, this is the active area. This is where they've been filling. So, and if you look, they went from 283, down to about 200. So they've gotten about 100 SCFM of methane at that point. But they went in after that in April and May and installed horizontals throughout the active area. And then they knocked the emissions down even more. So down to about 130. So about 150 SCFM shows up in the quantification. They got 500 SCFM of additional landfill gas, which was 200 SCFM of product gas, which is pretty close to the numbers we estimated. And the numbers vary based off of different things, but that's about $1.5 million of revenue for 4 flights. The cost of 4 flights, which I think they're going to pay every time. The other critical thing, though, is if you look on that data trend, they had, where is it? The initial time they had 19 locations over 500, then it was 6, then it was 5, and by the last time it was 0. I was hunting over here trying to find anything over 100 parts per million to give them things to do, and it was hard. I think they had like 2. So we had managed to knock down the emissions really significantly on that. But they used, like I said, they used this information, they use the data trending, they use the well field analysis all together over time to knock the emissions down, to knock their to get their revenue up. And then this is a different company, but they've been using this for 2 or 3 years. And at one of their sites, they said that the data that we provided them, the insights, helped them to focus their capital and their operational expenses in the proper locations, and they ended up increasing their gas collection by 1,000 SCFM. Now, they're not saying that we found 1,000 SCFM, but we allowed them to focus in the right places to collect the gas, and that's kind of what we do. And now we're going to talk about compliance. So right now, if you see on the right, this is what we got. We got a guy walking, and the paths are never going to be straight. The nozzle, you can watch that nozzle, it's up and down and all around. He's walking over terrain, through vegetation. It's not an easy job. Now, when I put these slides up here, I don't put this up here to bag or dog people who are doing manual method 21. It's really hard. If you think about trying to walk 57 miles across a landfill on 3-to-1 slopes over rough terrain in 95-degree weather with ticks and snakes and groundhogs and all the stuff you see on a landfill, it's almost impossible. And that's why the sniffer drone was designed, is to take the guy out of the walking, have them just focus on what humans do well. The drone is great at doing the serpentine path. Humans are good at going to a point and looking for smells, looking for disturbed vegetation and signals that indicate methane, and identifying the exact location where they are. And that's the way the system's set up. Backspace. Okay, so right now, alternative method 150. That is the letter from the EPA that approves OTM 51 to be used in lieu of method 21 to do quarterly compliance monitoring at the landfills. The Alt 150 was approved in December of 22, and we've been doing this on landfills now for, well, since. So basically 23 on. So we're coming up on 3 years that we've been doing OTM 51 across a bunch of landfills across the United States. One of the things you got to note is regulations are getting ramped up, right? The 30 meters is what the national, like if you look at CF or XXX, triple O, quad A, you have to do a 30-meter serpentine path. But a lot of states are cramping down, and you're looking at 7.5 meters or 25 feet, which is really tight spacing. If you've got to walk a 25-foot, 7.5 meter path across a 300-acre landfill, that's a really, really hard thing to have somebody do. You can see we are included in the Canada draft regulation that goes into effect in January of 27. We've just been included in the Colorado draft regulation, and I believe they had the final comments here in August. I got to check on the status, but we're included in that. That's supposed to go into effect in January of next year. So we've already been doing a lot of emission studies for clients in Colorado to help them get ready for that regulation. We're in the final processes. It says checked as far as OTM 51. We're in the final processes of getting approval in Oregon. We have a site that's sponsoring us there. We've gone through the whole process with the regulators, but they decided that we had to do a comment period. So we're in the comment period right now. So hopefully by Q4, we'll be starting operations in Oregon on OTM 51. We were included in the regulations for Washington. So we are regulatorily approved for there, and we have 5 or 6 clients that we do OTM 51 in Washington. And while we're not approved in California yet, we're working with the regulators there in their current regulations that we're doing. But we've also been written into consent orders or abatement orders in California. So we've done a couple of sites in California, one that we literally fly weekly right now. So we do a lot of work in California as well. Yeah. So what is method 21 versus OTM 51? I think the best way to say this is method 21 says that you have to traverse the landfill in a serpentine path at 30 meters. Really, the only difference between method 21 and OTM 51 is that we're traversing it with a drone, you're traversing it with a guy walking. Other than that, it's almost the exact same thing. It was designed that way because that was our pathway to get approval. So we're still using parts per million. We're not using parts per million meter. We still have to do the same calibration with 0 gas and 500 parts per million gas. We still have to fly the 30-meter path unless it's in a state that requires 25 foot. One thing that we provide that method 21 doesn't is when we fly our paths, we can put a geospatial buffer on every single data point that gives us, shows that we have full coverage. And if we have an area where we missed for some reason, whether we had to veer off path for an obstacle, whatever, we go and manually fill that in. So we have 100% coverage across the surface of the landfill. We still have the same requirements for follow-ups, 10, 20, 30, plus 10. Or actually 30, that's 1 month. It's not 30. That's a bugaboo on my part. We still have to do the upwind, downwind, background readings. And we don't use the drone for penetrations. Right now, the drone does a serpentine path. If they identify a location that's 200 parts per million, a field technician will go to that location and manually verify and put a flag on the ground. But we also manually do all the penetrations. So that's exactly the same as well. We currently are in the process, we're under review to get a method to include penetrations as part of TM51, and we're just working through that process. One of the things that's kind of weird about method 21 is it says that you're supposed to, if you see an increased meter reading, you're supposed to stop and you're supposed to look for indicators and I try to identify the location. But what it doesn't do is identify what an increased meter reading is. Some people will do 200, some will say 250, some say 499, so it's not clear. Well, it's clearly defined in OTM 51 that increased meter reading is 200 parts per million. We manually verify 200 parts per million, and if we find something over 500, we mark it. If we don't, it's not reportable. So that's something that we do. We also provide cover integrity using the 4K camera on the drone. So we're kind of killing two birds with one stone on that. And we talked about the spiral method. So why use method 21 instead of why use OTM 51 instead of method 21? Well, one of the biggest reasons is this operation over safety. Having a guy walk 30 to 50 miles on a landfill in all weather with all the hazards is just not good in this day and age. It doesn't make sense. The drone can do it better, the drone can do it faster, and the drone don't care about side slopes or snakes or anything like that. The second reason is just operational efficiency, especially when you start ramping up how tight the spacing is. We can do it twice as fast. We just fly faster. We're flying at 7.5 miles an hour. The average person walks about 2 miles an hour, and we don't have to avoid hazardous terrain and all that other thing. So it's just more efficient. And then, of course, the last thing is we just collect better data. The spacing between paths is very precise and can be adjusted. The spacing between data points is very precise. Our sensor operates at 3 hertz, which means it collects 3 data points per second. Flying at 7.5 miles an hour, that gives it about a data point every 3 to 4 feet, just over a meter. And that is very consistent throughout. Okay, a guy walking, he's going to slow down, he's going to speed up, he's going to avoid obstacles. It just can't be avoided. It's a hard job. So this provides you with very accurate, very good spacing, which allows you to get better results, but also to do other things. And we also provide the geospatial buffer for quality control. All right, this kind of just lays out how you do it. We traverse the landfill at site-specific spacing, whether it's 25 meters, whether it's whether it's 30 meters, whether it's 7.5 meters, whatever it is. We're going to identify anywhere that we see 200 parts per million. We are going to send a guy out there, and you can see the spiral pattern. They go to the middle of that circle, and they just start spiraling until they identify it. If they don't find anything within that 15-meter radius, then they mark it as unconfirmed, and there's no exceedance there. And then they manually do the penetrations. This is just some examples of cover integrity that's been identified by our cameras. Obviously, erosion rills, damaged cover. That's kind of extreme situation with the damage of temp cover. Leachate seeps, more cover issues, distressed vegetation. And so as we're flying, the pilot's flying on the pre-programmed path, but he's watching. He's watching on the camera. We have and for OTM 51, we have a gimbaled 4K camera, and he's kind of looking. As he identifies the leachate seep, he deviates manually off the path, gets a picture of that gets geotagged, and then the drone automatically snaps back on to the path and continues on. Anytime we geotag a location like this, it gets added to the things that have to be manually verified by the field technician. So that's just another check that we do as part of the process. And this kind of lays out the process. The initial inspection, we typically send 2 people out, a pilot and a field technician. We'll fly the site, we'll do the verifications, and every day that we're out there, you get a daily report that summarizes anything that was found, where it's at, parts per million, what's going on with it. And also, it's instantaneously available on the app, okay? Do the follow-ups the same way you would do with regular method 21. We can do the follow-ups. You can have a third party do the follow-ups, or a site personnel that are trained can do the follow-ups. It just has to be added into the app, and that way we can track it for you. And then at the end, we have a whole slew of reports that we provide in accordance with the requirements of the regulations. So recommendations. Every time I see Benjamin Franklin, I think of the $100 bill, even though he's supposed to be like, a lot of other things. A lot of our clients, especially with the advent of new regulations and new requirements, are doing emission studies, non-compliance studies, prior to the regulations taking effect. That way they have a better idea. If you used to walk in at 30 meters and all of a sudden you have to do, the 7.5 meters with instantaneous and integrated monitoring and everything else, it's really important that you understand where you are before it kicks into place. Another thing is if you have a renewable energy plant on site, you can partner with them, share the cost of it, or whatever. And then thinking ahead, you might want to budget. We can, if you want to try studies, or if you want to understand what the cost of OTM 51 is, get with us. We can provide you a budgetary quote that you can use for budget planning, and then going forward, we'll be able to do operations. Rob likes this. I mean, well, he might not like this. I don't know. If you decide to book something here, we'll give you a free interpreter map, which is one of our most popular and actually most useful maps. And if you can do it by the end of the year. And another thing the Gen 2 allows us to do is do partnership program where we don't fly it. We provide you with the hardware. We provide you with the Gen 2 package. You mount it on your own drone, you fly it with your own pilots, you send us the data, and we process everything, provide you with the software. So that's another option if you're interested, whether you're a consultant or if you're a municipality that wants to do your own thing, we can work with you on that as well. And then there's just some accolades. We were put as one of the top green tech companies. I love this because we're a little tiny company, but we ranked 174 out of 4,600 companies. And we never even asked for this. They just picked us without us even knowing. So that was pretty cool. Also some other things here. And so a lot of good stuff there.